All right. Hello, everybody. All you hardcore SharePoint people. When we found out what our time was, we were thinking there'd be 5 of you guys, but you'd be very, very interested. So it's good that there's more than you. So we're here today to talk about AMD.com and how we migrated from SharePoint 2007 to SharePoint 2013. With me today are, so I should introduce myself first. So my name is Gil Canari, and I manage global digital marketing and web operations for AMD. With me is Katie Bowman. She's on my team. She manages the global web infrastructure and infrastructure team for marketing. And our colleagues from IT, we have Bruce Weatherford, Senior IT Architect, and Michael Milkey, who runs all of the SharePoint infrastructure for AMD. So today, we're going to talk to you guys about the background. We're going to give you a little bit of information about AMD.com, what it's used for, what kind of traffic it gets, to give you some context for what you're about to hear. And then we're going to take you through a very detailed discussion of the SharePoint features we used and didn't use. So I think that's going to be something very interesting. Bruce and Katie will take you guys through that. Michael will walk you through the infrastructure, and then together they'll talk you through the scalability. And in the end, we want to walk through some lessons learned, some things that we had figured out the hard way just so you guys don't have to. And then there'll be some Q&A if we have some time. So before we get started, how many of you guys know who AMD is? See, marketing works, people. I keep telling these guys. So most of you guys probably know that we make a lot of the processors and graphic cards that drive all the computers you guys use. We also make the processor inside the Xbox One. We're really proud of that, actually. And if you go outside, a lot of those gaming machines out there actually have our processors in them. Now, just remember, if it goes really ugly for you, we didn't write the code. We just built the processors. So a little about AMD.com. AMD.com is our external-facing site. It's anonymous, and it's designed to serve all of our end users, commercial, consumer, et cetera. Like all sites like that, it's designed to deliver product information, company information, support information, the standard corporate website. So what you're looking at right now is our support section. This site gets about between 3/4 to 80% of the traffic to the site. It does the standard support stuff. It's got FAQs, it's got videos, all of that standard stuff. One of the interesting things, though, about this site is the drivers. So our product model is we deliver a product, and then we upgrade it pretty much every month. We deliver a new driver package, and a lot of people actually take us up on that. Between 7 and 9 million people download those drivers every month. So it's a significant number. And the way they do it is they come to this page, and they put in their product information, and it takes them to this page. This page is a driver display page, and the little red circle or the red square is the download link. So you're probably thinking, that's not that impressive, that's pretty basic. And it kind of is, except for the fact that that download link and others like it gets clicked 3 times a second. So every second, 3 people start a download on our site, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. So what else can I tell you about AMD.com? Well, we already talked about the traffic. The way I like to think about it is, effectively, the entire population of New York, LA, and Austin come to visit once a month. And they look at 72 million pages, which the last time I did the math, and hopefully it's right, is about 30 pages per second. So we do a lot of business on the site, or we serve a lot of pages on the site. Something else you should know about this site is that it's kind of large. So we think there's about 10,000 pages. We embarrassingly probably don't actually know the exact number. We know it's north of 10,000. The other thing that's interesting is of those 10,000 pages, only about 1,000 of them are actually in English. The other 9,000 are in other languages. And that's because if you look at the traffic on our site, only 19% of our traffic comes from North America. The rest of them, 80% of our traffic is coming from somewhere outside North America and going to our regional sites, or Japan sites, or China sites, or Germany sites, et cetera. So running a site that large and that global, in terms of managing content, it's a whole other session probably. But you can find me at Ask the Expert, and I'll tell you can buy me a drink. That actually probably works better. So why migrate from SharePoint 2007? It's probably not that hard a question to answer, actually. But if you ran into me at the tables, I'm not afraid of risk. But even I'm not crazy enough to run a site this large on a site that's no longer on mainstream support. It's just not a good idea. So we effectively had to move last year. The other thing we were starting to run into is we're just running into the product limitations. The product is 6, 7 years old. It just doesn't have the features that you'd expect out of a newer content management system, a lot of the search-driven features, et cetera. So it was just basically time. We were also running into some challenges with our content deployment solution. For those of you guys who aren't familiar with it, what content deployment does is it lets us author in our secure environment, and it pushes the content out into the DMZ to be served anonymously. It worked pretty well, but the problem is now, anytime we have to do anything critical, like a product launch or a lot of pages, what was happening is it's taking like an hour or longer from the time we hit publish to the time it shows up. And my marketing bosses are not big fans of that delay. So that's something we just had to fix as well. And then the last thing is, frankly, we over-customized this thing. When we delivered the 07 version, we did 18 customizations, and some of them were really basic, right? Some of them were a literal translation thing that let us run one master page for all languages. That was actually nice and useful. But then we did things that maybe weren't as smart, where we did things like we changed the entire way the variations were handled inside the system. We kind of rewrote some pretty fundamental code. And I would really give that guy a hard time, the guy that approved that, but unfortunately that was me a few years ago. So
we give him a hard time.
Yeah, they do it for me. I had my reasons for that. They were not good reasons, but they were reasons. No. So why SharePoint 2013? Actually before that, you're probably wondering why we never moved to 13 or to 10, and that's actually because of the customizations a little bit, and also because we didn't really see some of the improvements that we wanted to see between 7 and 10. But when we started looking last year about what we were going to do, or the year before that actually, using SharePoint again was not a done deal. The Microsoft guys will tell you, this was not something they assumed they've got. Because we actually spent quite a bit of time doing research on other solutions. We spent time doing RFPs. We did all the standard work. But in the end, we ended back on SharePoint. We did because, these reasons. When we looked at the cost structure, when we looked at standing up something completely new with all the training, all the infrastructure, all of the software, frankly, SharePoint was just much more cost effective. The other thing that really came in on SharePoint's favor is just the sheer amount of knowledge that the teams on both marketing and IT had on SharePoint. These guys know SharePoint almost as well as anybody. I'd put them up against any other team. The other thing that we found when we looked at the feature list is SharePoint 2013 has all the features we were looking for. A lot of the things that we customized are in there natively. So all the things we wanted were in there. And for all those reasons, plus the fact that we had a really strong relationship with Microsoft, it just seemed like the right reason. Just a little backstory. The 2007 deployment was a struggle. Those guys will vouch for that. But what we found in that is, we ran into issues, ran into problems, but every step of the way, Microsoft was there to help us. We were able to work with them directly. We knew that if we started this and it didn't go well, we would get support. And frankly, this implementation went much, much smoother anyway. So those are the reasons why we went to SharePoint 2013. Let's talk a little bit about how we approached it. So, one of my fundamental tenets as a marketing guy who owns a lot of IT things, effectively, is that these decisions have to be made jointly. This is something that we as a team sat down, we as a team did research, we as a team went to the MTC and did all the work that we needed to make the agreement, and we made the CMO and the CIO say yes. So it was a joint decision the whole way, so that was very successfully approached. The other thing that we did is we tried this thing before we bought it. When we did 07, I think we were probably one of the first large-scale sites out there, and some of the marketing material they gave us wasn't quite accurate. So this time, we spent 2 weeks at the MTC, we built out a proof of concept, we tested everything we wanted to use, we really, really, really kicked the tires. And what that did is that gave us a great sense of what to use and what not to use, and you'll hear a lot of that information as we go through this deck. The other thing, a lot of times when you move from a version of a tool to another version, you kind of just assume the same things. So we made a very explicit effort to sit down and think through what we decided previously and change it. Just because it's still SharePoint doesn't mean it's the same thing. So we reviewed a lot of our decisions about content management and customizations, and we did it differently, which actually had a really, really beneficial result. And the last thing that these guys, the IT guys, did for us really well is they built us a custom migration tool so we didn't have to hand code all of those thousands and thousands of pages. So that really helped us in getting us to the new system really fast. So that's the background. And why don't we talk about the features? So Katie and Bruce will walk you guys through the features, and I'll get off the stage so you can hear these guys.
All righty. So I think what you're going to see here is probably some surprises, some things we did not use. So we use managed navigation, search, variations as you would expect. But what we didn't use, well, we already mentioned content deployment. We had never had such a huge sigh of relief as being able to stop using content deployment because it was such a source of issues.
It was an epic party. I mean, there was a celebration.
No cross-site publishing and catalogs. Richard DeZerga, who was at the MTC with us for the 2 weeks, and we pounded him with so many questions, can help speak to that. Strangely enough, no design manager, no device channels, and then also SharePoint apps, right? Because you hear a lot over and over again, at least at the last conference, SharePoint apps, no more farm solutions. But that's not really the case for a large, anonymous, internet-facing site like ours.
So the first feature we're going to talk about is managed navigation, and this is one that we were really excited about. Friendly URLs, so great. Everybody was so happy to get rid of /pages, /pagename.aspx after everything. It's been great for SEO. It's really nice because you can add multiple terms to a physical page. For us, this is huge because we want to get the information to our users however our users are comfortable with it. If you want to find out about desktop processors, do you go to desktop, then processors, or do you go to processors, then desktop? Because of managed navigation, we can allow that path, both of those ways, to get to the same page. This also allows us to not have our site hierarchy, our actual physical hierarchy, based on the information architecture that we want to display to the users, which is a huge relief for us. I mean, how many subsites?
200 subsites per variation.
Per variation, 200 per variation. So we could build out that architecture now.
Now down to 4.
About 4.
I mean, think about the work they have to do if they want to move something around, right? You have to go manage content and structure and move whole subsites around and everything like that. All that's gone. So much easier now.
And doing that with content deployment was, you had to have surgical timing. It was scary. So it's been great. We couldn't be happier with the managed navigation. A couple of things that, we would like, though. Managed navigation doesn't work with the out-of-the-box breadcrumb control. It's based off of a sitemap, which managed navigation is not. So a couple, little disconnects there between different features on the site and the managed navigation. Little things, always displays the route in the global nav. So with us having variations, we actually don't need the route to show up, so you could use JavaScript to hide it. But just having a little bit more flexibility there would have been nice.
So we did, unfortunately, run into one pretty massive bug with this feature during all of our testing. And what would happen, basically, is that the object cache would get corrupted on the site, and it would come to a complete crawl. It was a complete showstopper for us. It's actually one of the reasons we actually were delayed in our go-live. But luckily, through the heroics of our SharePoint DSE, Suraj Muhammad is in the room with us, our Microsoft account manager, the Premier support folks, and the SharePoint product team, they were able to get us a private fix in 7 weeks, and that's pretty unheard of. This fix subsequently showed up in the October CU.
Tip jar at the back. You're welcome.
You're going to find that in a few cases we've identified and had a couple of bugs fixed for you. So tip jar, buy Strinkletter, whatever works best for you.
So search, of course we used search. How can you not? For us, this was amazing because we went from SharePoint 2007 search straight to SharePoint 2013 search, and we're like, all right, is there a hidden camera? Why does this work so well? What's going on? It's been great. Of course, accuracy is really good. The nice thing as well for my team is that site admins have control over search results, search configuration, things like that, where previously we had to pester these guys to get those sort of things set up. So it's been really nice the business has been empowered to manage the search since we manage the web analytics as well. So challenges, on the marketing side, we didn't have a ton. We didn't go with the out-of-the-box search center, but that was just because, we're picky, and we wanted a little bit more flexibility. We did, however, run into a few bugs.
So friendly URLs is one of those parts of the product that had not been fully implemented throughout. So there would be spaces where they wouldn't quite work. So for example, in the Search Center navigation, it simply would not accept a friendly URL. That's one of the bugs that's been fixed. It's going to be showing up in the April CU pretty soon here. Also, strangely enough, we had a lot of this early on, is that it would accept in search navigation a draft page, which is, I guess, all fine, but then when the link would get rendered on the anonymous site, it would have this weird fix-up redirect.aspx page, and then if an end user clicked on it, then you would get this message. So we had to deal with a lot of these. I don't know if you've ever dealt with fix-up redirect before, but that indicates something's wrong with your site, right? And so for us, that indicated a bug here. So another one fixed in the April 2014 CU. Query suggestions. So this is also known as autocomplete. And this is actually a pretty cool feature where a user can start typing a query and it'll go, oh, hey, we've had a lot of other people type this query before. Right? One thing we came to realize is that this is actually disabled for anonymous sites, and there's actually a valid reason for that, right? Because as Katie can attest to, if their content authors are searching for a page that maybe they want to edit or something like that, but it's a new product we're about to launch, we don't want that information kind of be leaked out. Right?
Yeah, we have, there's no way to go through and manage those. And having reviewed the search analytics reports from our site, there's some search queries that we would prefer not show up there. So for anonymous, it just didn't work for us.
So we may go back one day and try and figure out a solution that will allow us to kind of just pre-populate some query suggestions that would only show up on the anonymous sites. But that was definitely a learning opportunity for us.
Content by search, can't you search without that? So we've been very happy with the content by search web parts. We replaced most of our web parts that were previously content query with content by search, and have been pretty happy with the display templates. The slide that Gil showed earlier that had the download driver, that's all done through display templates. And they've been really fairly easy to work with. Once we kind of got in there and figured out what was going on, wasn't a lot of documentation on them at build time, so a lot of trial and error, except for Siraj has some great documentation on it. But we found the display templates to be very powerful and fairly robust, and it saved us a lot of time building out our support site, because it is a lot of search. And the drivers, if we don't have drivers available, that's not good for anybody. That's the call that I get at 3 a.m., and I don't want that. So display templates made it easy to build, and it's been working really well for us.
So we in IT have always been about giving power to our partners in marketing so that they don't have to wait for us to get around to doing something for them. I mean, we basically provision the site collections and the farms, understand the capacity that they expect, and we hand that over to them and let them do everything. But especially back in the 2007 days, there was a lot of areas where we still had to get involved, and that had, creating managed properties, for example. But with 2013, some managed properties are automatically created by default, and the site collection administrators have a fair amount of control in creating and adjusting managed properties. But there are still some managed properties that need to be configured by us in IT to make it queryable, searchable, accessible by anonymous and stuff like that. So Michael's team has a bunch of PowerShell scripts that they run to kind of do those final configuration of the managed properties. But we're still pretty happy with that. These guys get to start a lot of that and then kind of come back to us when they need it.
So the last note on here is very specific to us being a huge global external site. But should you run into that circumstance as well, make sure you thoroughly test browser and operating systems with your display templates. We ran into some issues with older versions of Windows and Internet IE8. And we're a big global site. In India, China, some of those other regions, they don't have the fastest networks, not always, the modern browsers like we have here. So for us, it was very important. And we did find a few little quirks working with those older technologies and display templates, but we were able to get them worked out. So just something, fairly particular to us, but good to know if you guys find yourself doing that as well. Variations. We love variations. That's one of the reasons that we were very happy with SharePoint. And they worked great in 2007, and they work really great in SharePoint 2013.
Well, wait a minute, I think your memory is a little too good. We had a lot of problems with variations back in 2007.
Well,
so we like to think that we contributed to them being so good and faster and stable in 2013 right now.
All right, you got me there. They were pretty good in SharePoint 2007. They worked. They ended up working in SharePoint 2007. We'll leave it there. But in 2013, they've been very simple for us to set up on the marketing side. One of the best things is the selective acceptance of propagated pages. This is really important for a site of our size with as many regions as we have. So for pages that aren't relevant to, to Poland, they don't care about this, press release or whatever because it's not relevant to them. It's nice for them to be able to decline it or to not accept changes if we make updates in the English site. Those updates aren't relevant there. It's nice. It keeps the site small. It gives the users control. They don't have to keep rolling back in the version history to their last translated page. So it's been very, very helpful.
Yeah, I think one of the things, it's interesting from an IT perspective, our content database for support on 2007 was going upwards of 60 gigabytes. And that's because at the time, we were having 23 variations. And you think about all those pages getting replicated down through all the variations, even though they may never get used. So this gives us the opportunity to kind of keep that content database smaller and more nimble.
Yeah, we may not have set up version limiting on SharePoint 2007. So when you've got it...
That's hard to go back and fix after the fact, people. Be sure you set those version limits early on. Right?
Yeah.
Duh.
So that definitely made that difficult to manage. Challenges as far as variations, everything works great, just some little things. For us, it would be nice to be able to really be granular with whether we set automated propagation down at kind of the library levels, pages, libraries, things like that. But, nothing too crazy.
So one thing to keep out for, and we've dealt with this a lot in the past, so we tend to move sites around between environments, right? And what we do is we just basically take the content database and move it between, dev, QA, and prod. But one thing we found out is that when we do this, when you got to cite variations, you have to get familiar with an old friend. It's an STS-ADM command called -o variation fixup tool, right? If you don't run that tool when we reattach content database between web apps, then variations will randomly not propagate, right? So you do want to be careful about that. We did find one issue kind of related to variations in that reusable content for the Turkish variation would not render correctly. And that happened to be one of the variations that was kind of important to us, right? So that is another bug that's going to be showing up in the April 2014 CU. Tip jar or drink later.
All right, so this next slide is just kind of a screenshot of the support homepage that Gil showed earlier, and then it in German and Chinese. So it's great. It's essential for a site like ours. All right, so something maybe a little bit surprising, something we did not use at all was cross-site publishing. And Richard will probably never forgive us for the first 2 days of the POC, where we tried so hard to make cross-site publishing work for us. 2 straight days of nothing but trying to get it to fit, and it just didn't fit. So mostly business reasons for us, things like it's essential to our internal business sponsors that they can preview their content in context, in place, before it goes live.
Yeah, so with catalogs and cross-site publishing, you might create a list item or you create a page, and the business sponsor can take a look at that page, but they want to see it, like Katie said, in context. They want to see what it's going to look like in the site. But with 2013 in search, it no longer crawls and picks up draft pages like it used to back with 2007. So we had to say, trust us, the page will show up, it'll look up here, right?
Reliable.
They didn't really go for that.
No, they were not going to go for that. So there was also some things that we ran into with catalogs and variations. We'll actually get into this more a little bit on the next slide. So if you want to talk about the databases.
Yeah, so just a minor point there. Again, moving content databases back and forth between environments, you will have to reconnect any catalogs that you're using. Those connections don't automatically come through. So IT pros are doing restore between environments, kind of keep an eye out for that.
So really, bottom line, it just didn't fit in our business process. And we also have very little multi-use content. It's an information, it's a consumer information site, some B2B, but it's mostly single-use content. So it just made it so much more simple. I mean, I remember the sigh of relief when we decided not to use it. It was like, okay, now that feels better. So we use search queries, where we need to, and it's been great. It's worked out really well. But cross-site publishing is a great feature, and it's something that we are always keeping in mind. And as the needs of the business change, and as the content changes, and as new things come, it's something that we are definitely remembering for the future. So catalogs. Ooh, excuse me. Bottom line here, they don't work very well unless you're using cross-site publishing. So we also tried to use catalogs. We found all this out, of course, after we'd already made them. Some little things, managed metadata. You have to have a managed metadata column to connect to a catalog. You can't simply just connect to the catalog. Variations was kind of was the final nail in the coffin when it came to catalogs. Limited support without cross-site publishing. You can only make one connection to a catalog. So one of the places we wanted to use this was our knowledge base articles on our support site, which are in English, and our regional viewers are used to them being in English. So we were going to create that as a catalog, connect all of our regional sites to the knowledge base, and pull the data. But you could only have one connection. So
yeah, one thing again with cross-site publishing and catalogs, the way they kind of expect is that your data is going to be split into multiple site collections, right? It's going to be all spread around, and then you're going to connect to those. And you can only connect to a catalog once in a site collection, but you can't really do that when you have multiple variations, right? So we have 3 site collections, 3 web apps, one for support.amd.com, one for search.amd.com, and then one that we're going to be going live soon for dev.amd.com. So we really tried hard. I mean, it was actually quite dramatic for us, I think.
It was.
We were trying to use it. And it was bad enough that we were first doing this during the week before, out of the NBC, the week before Christmas, and the bar was closing early that night, right? And then trying to figure out how to use catalogs, it just didn't work for us.
Yeah. So yeah, it is, the single connection is inside a site collection. Thank you, I should have specified that. So we didn't use them. We use lists and libraries and search. Okay, my favorite subject.
Some good stuff here.
Is Design Manager. Design Manager is a really, really nice idea. And I think it has a very good future. However, it's definitely a 1.0 version. So I think this is another reason why I can't believe Richard and Suraj still talk to me. Because I spent a lot of the time in the POC showing them how I broke the site with Design Manager. So one of the big issues is design packages. So design packages are supposed to pull your publishing items that you have modified, customized, created new, and published. However, they pull everything. Every publishing, site content type, site column, page layout, master page, CSS, JavaScript, XSLT, display templates, and of course you can add search queries if you want to. Pulls everything. So if, that's okay, we can work with that. You move it to a site collection that's out of the box, haven't modified any of the out of the box things. Deploy it. It'll overwrite everything. So something to keep in mind, if you've changed any of those out of the box layouts or whatnot, they will be a little overwritten. The big problem is that, the design package is a solution. So it can be uninstalled. And when you uninstall it, it uninstalls everything that was in the package. And because every publishing item you need is in that design package, if you uninstall it, you have a publishing site with no publishing items. You have no publishing content types. You have no publishing master pages. You have no publishing anything, and your site's busted. So it's usable still. Just be very careful with it and be very well aware with some of those nuances. Another issue that I ran into with it was creating page layouts and master pages through the Design Manager. This is one nice thing about it is it has really great preview mode in the browser. But to achieve that, you have to assign a master page to a page layout when you create it. So then you can see it in the browser and it looks pretty. How they've done that, though, is they've added a whole bunch of master page code into the page layout. So that's a little bit of a code snippet there from the page layout. You can see there's the opening HTML tag and the head tag and all of your SharePoint placeholders are all in your page layout. So if there are some changes that if you make them to the master page, they're not going to show in your page layouts until you go and update the page layout and fix the master page code. So where I ran into this, my little story, is during the proof of concept. I was making the site, making the design, doing all the branding. I forgot to add the left nav to the master page. No problem. I'll go add the left nav in. Added it in. Went and looked at my pages. No left nav. So it was a placeholder that hadn't been put in the master page, so it wasn't called in the layout, so I had to go and update all of my layouts to add that in. So just be sure that your master page is solid. Make sure it's done, or you may have to go back and do some page layout maintenance afterward. So it needs a little love, needs a little refinement, but we were fortunate enough that, my team has everybody's SharePoint, design and this sort of experience is about 8 years. So we are very used to using SharePoint Designer, and because of all the customizations that we had, we didn't use display mode in SharePoint Designer anyway, so we didn't even know it was gone. Everyone started talking about there's no display mode. We're like,
I don't know, Peter complained about it pretty broadly at the beginning.
Yeah, he does all the... Yeah. So anyway, so we did it the old school way. Worked out well for us. But it'll be good to see where Design Manager goes in the future. I think it really is going to open up design to a lot of people who haven't ever worked in SharePoint before. And it is an avenue for them. It just needs a little work.
And to be fair, this was about a year ago, right, when we were at the MTC. And we just immediately ran into so many issues. We said, you know what? Let's just stop.
No.
Katie has all the experience. If we would have had the time, we would have opened up support cases to determine whether or not there were really bugs or not and get them fixed. But this is another area where this feature just didn't necessarily fit our business process. We didn't necessarily need to use it, so we just kind of moved on. So your mileage may vary, so just be sure to thoroughly test things out.
So device channels is another new feature in SharePoint that we didn't use, and it was purely business case. We did some testing. They worked great. I can't control every device and every browser that our site is accessed from across the world, and I am certainly not going to make a design or a device channel for all of those because I wouldn't be able to do anything else. Never get it done. So it was just completely unmanageable. We did have a few issues when we tried to do kind of like a fallback mobile user agent string with our CDN, with Akamai, our caching system, just getting the user agent strings to not argue. And the benefit just wasn't worth the time to really get that to work. So we just use responsive web, and it works well. And the designers are really good and know to keep the image sizes small, and you don't have to worry about Flash because nobody cares about it anymore. So we just, keep the pages small. Responsive design works really well for us. So that's our homepage, desktop, and mobile version. So, but I mean, this one I wish that we had some use cases for internally, because as a designer, I think it's so great that you can target, your audience. Bruce, he's on a Surface. He's not actually on a Surface, but he wants to be.
People, it appears.
And I can go and I can make an experience for him on that device. So, for an internal circumstance where what your users are accessing your site on, I think it's great. And as a designer, we would like to be able to target that for everybody, but there's just no way with a site of our size. So, there you go.
All right. Now, Michael's going to come up and join me, and we're going to talk a little bit about the infrastructure that is behind our site, and then we'll also talk a little bit about how we're able to scale it. So one thing that was interesting, we did have a limited engagement with Microsoft Consulting Services to kind of help us validate our approach with regards to the infrastructure and also kind of assist the marketing team to kind of answer some questions. And one thing that I thought was particularly interesting is that we got to use a little bit of what they call the PLA, or the product line architecture. That is basically some best practices that Microsoft Consulting Services has that's based on their knowledge over the years, over Premier support, and they kind of trying to package everything up, right, so that it's a very repeatable, so you're not trying to engineer everything from scratch every time. Unfortunately, the PLA that they had was really based on internet sites. So with our MCS consultant, we kind of tweaked it for internet-facing sites. Also, we're very big on documentation, so we created a service description document, which is basically was our agreement with the marketing team on what service we were going to provide for them, a functional spec, a build guide, which went into detail of how we were going to implement that. Then we also did a functional test plan and a performance test plan. So as part of the PLA, what they do, they sometimes create what's called a stamp. Right? So all servers would have the same configuration, and this is a stamp that we went for the SharePoint servers. Everything we have is virtual, including SQL Server. We'll talk a little bit about that more later. So our stamp for our servers is 4 cores and 16 gigabyte of RAM, right? So instead of trying to determine, well, do we need the search servers to have more memory than the WFEs or what have you, everything's the same. If we need to do anything, we just scale out and just bring out more servers.
This slide covers the differences between our 2007 and 2013 environment that we're going to cover in the following slides. With 2007, yeah, there you go. With 2007, we had 6 farms, 2 dev, 2 QA, and 2 production. We had the internal authoring farm, which pushed content out to the DMZ, to our external production farm. And then we moved to 2013, which we were able to reduce our farms down to 3, and also remove content deployment to allow the direct editing, which in turn allowed us to really reduce the amount of overhead and time it took to install CUs, troubleshoot, and really simplify the environment for us.
Yeah, interesting. When we first made the determination to use content deployment back in the 2007 days, it was actually even recommended to us that we would have content get published from the dev farm to the QA farm to the prod farm. I mean, we had our hands full enough just going from an authoring farm to a production farm. And we thought that content deployment kind of gave us a little buffer to catch mistakes that might be made, or might be a little bit more secure because content wasn't visible. But in reality, content deployment actually pushes the draft pages out as well. So we weren't really gaining anything. So we were able to simplify again with this.
And our production farm consists of 3 web applications. And we do use alternate access mappings to enable anonymous and authoring. We do have a single site collection for each web app. This worked out well. We did this both in 2007 and 2013. One of the best things that Gil and them mentioned earlier was that they did agree to go as much out of the box as possible, which is, was great for my team. We're going from 18 customizations down to 2, really simplified the environment. We didn't have to install as much troubleshoot. We had a lot less issues. And then going forward, when the next version comes out, upgrading is going to be much simpler.
Yeah, one of the customizations that we did, and we later severely regretted, was in the beginning on support, we didn't like the fact that variations would only propagate from a certain set of lists and libraries, like documents and images, for example. And darn it, we wanted our marketing documents library to be propagated to all the variations. So we used one of our consulting agencies and wrote what we call the Variation Propagation Event Handler. And that actually propagated other document libraries for us. Boy, was that a mistake. And what's so funny now is now that we've gone to 13, we don't even use any other odd libraries anymore. We stick with this, the straight out-of-the-box libraries like the Pages library and such. Lessons learned there. I'm sorry, we need to hold questions until the end. But
in 2013, we spent a lot of time working out trying to figure out exactly how the architecture should be. We ended up going with a 4-tier. We ended up with 4 web front ends, 2 back ends, 2 search servers, and then an active SQL server.
Yeah, this is one of those areas where we spent a lot of time with MCS trying to figure out what those tiers would be and what the services would be in each of those tiers. Okay, so in 2007, we did everything, all the installs manual. So there was a lot of run setup.exe, next, okay, typing things in. So Michael and I came to the agreement that with 2013, we were going to automate the heck out of everything. And we actually did a pretty good job with this, right?
We had massive documentation, which was able to reduce by this too, which saves a lot of time and reduces mistakes.
So I know this has been talked about in some other sessions here, but if you haven't checked this out, AutoSP Installer and Coplex is a must-have for automating your install. We actually started doing our own kind of PowerShell scripts. Luckily, with PowerShell, you can create and provision your own farms, but AutoSP Installer is a great tool. You give it an XML file that has the configuration of your farm. It'll go off and install it. And what's pretty cool is that with our 8-server farm, it's actually able to go off and do things like install the prerequisites, install the core SharePoint bits in parallel across all the 8 servers if you start that up right. Then it could actually create the farm. It can configure the web applications for you and install and configure all the services as well. So that allowed us to automate everything and get the whole farm installed relatively quickly. There's a companion tool on Coplex that's written by a different developer called AutoSP Installer GUI. And that gives you a nice form application that you can fill out, and it'll create the XML file. Really cool, but you need to be careful. The XML file that AutoSP Installer has is versioned. It supports a particular version. So you need to make sure that the AutoSP Installer GUI that you use corresponds to that version. We had problems with it. One of our Microsoft peers, James, pointed out that that's caused a lot of problems as well. But these are absolutely fabulous tools, and I strongly consider that you use them if you're not already doing so. So we did create some post-installation scripts to kind of tweak a few things. There's a few things AutoSP Installer didn't necessarily do very well. For example, it didn't give us any control over where the distributed cache server would be enabled. By default, it enables that on all servers of the farm. We just wanted to be running on the web front ends only, so we wrote a little PowerShell script that deprovisioned it, reprovisioned on just the servers that we want. The usage and health application database did not conform to our very strict naming conventions for database. By the way, we had very strict naming conventions for the service applications and the server nodes as well. We would do things like change the default continuous crawl time from 15 minutes down to 5 minutes. We would change the variation timer jobs, which were like, there's 3 of them, right? They were running 30 minutes and then 15 and 15, and we cut all that down to 5 minutes. And by the way, that has not been a problem for us. One other thing that you need to be really careful, our servers don't have direct access to the internet as part of our security model. So we had to be sure and disable the certificate revocation list, the CRL. If you don't do that, then the servers are constantly going to be trying to determine whether or not there's any certificates that should be revoked, and it's going to slow your farm down, right? So we put a little PowerShell script together that did that as well.
In 2007, we had one VLAN, or transaction zone. We worked with our information security group, and they came out with a much more secure environment for us in 2013. We went to 4 transaction zones. This allowed us to, have limited open protocols and ports between zones. The front internet-facing zone, holds our load balancers and our custom redirect servers. Then we had an application server zone, which spoke to our database server zones, and in turn then worked with our read-only domain controllers and our DNS entries.
Yeah, so the diagrams we've kind of given so far have been pretty simple. So here we go into a little bit more detail. As you can see, we have a hardware-based load balancer. We have a custom redirect server that allows our partners in marketing to create URLs like www.amd.com/game and have that forward to particular pages if you want to. So that sits in between and intercepts all the traffic. So one thing that we did here was we leveraged read-only domain controllers. In our previous config, the SharePoint servers themselves sat in a DMZ domain, right? And the authoring farm sat in our internal AMD domain, right? But we wanted to simplify the environment, but we didn't want since all the portions are going to have to sit in the DMZ now, and we were doing away with content deployment, we didn't want our partners in marketing to have maintain a different set of credentials, right? So how do we do this, right? And the MTC with Richard, we did some testing with ADFS, and that worked okay. But then we came to realize, hey, you know what? Let's just use read-only domain controllers, which was something new to us. So you'll see some information here about some things you need to watch out for, some ports that you need to open up. Read-only domain controllers are really great because they limit your attack surface. With read-only domain controllers, you don't necessarily replicate all the objects in the directory. You get to choose which ones are going to be replicated or can be cached at the RODC. You could even be really clear about what specific attributes are going to be cached as well. Right? So how do you set up Active Directory with your read-only domain controller? So we created subnets with the Active Directory team that had only the SharePoint and SQL servers on. We created Active Directory sites that corresponded to that subnets. And then we configured the password replication policy so that only the service accounts for SharePoint and SQL were actually cached on the RODC, as well as the actual machine counts itself, right? So that way, if the read-only domain controller lost connectivity to the read-write domain controller, the farm would continue to function. Now, our partners in marketing might not be able to log in, but we were okay with that because we were trying to limit, the number of accounts that were going to be cached. And to validate this, you use a command that's been around quite a while, nltest. And what we do is once you've got that in place, you do an nltest slash, directory services get DC and the name of your domain, and you validate when you run this command on the SharePoint, the SQL servers, that they're actually talking to only a read-only domain controller. So there's not much documentation with regards to read-only domain controllers. There is a KB article here that you see referenced, and even a year ago, they've actually since then have made some changes. They talk about, the people picker doesn't quite work well with trusted domains, but we've kind of found a few other issues as well that maybe if we went back and took a deeper look at today, it wouldn't be such an issue. We really wanted to let SharePoint manage its service accounts so that it would reset those passwords periodically, but we found that our testing that did not work with the read-only domain controller. So we have to manually reset those. We're sure to add the servers to the domain before we switch them over to using only the read-only domain controllers. And one other small issue that we've noticed is, and I think this is because of read-only domain controllers, is that when you're adding users to a SharePoint group, you might get this little message pop up for a little bit that says, sorry, we're having trouble reaching the server, but it does go away after a few minutes.
In 2007, we had an active-passive SQL Server communicating directly with a single SAN. When we went to 2013, we went with an active-active setup using SQL Server always-on availability groups. This was a big win for us for our high availability. Now it is a little more expensive. I mean, we needed a tier 1 backend because, in 2007 we really needed only like around 5,000 IOPS to run between the backend and the front end. With 2013, it definitely needed more. We ran up to about 16,000. But the benefit is that the redundancy is great. I mean, you have both SQL servers running we have two availability groups on one and one on the other. You have a redundant NICs, redundant switches, and then with having two separate SANs with all the data replicated on there, it allows us at any time we have an issue with one of the servers to be able to continue running while we fix the issues.
Yeah, we actually spent a fair amount of time going through the necessary calculations to determine how many IOPS we needed on the storage. And Microsoft has a lot of good documentation around this with TechNet. At the time that we were first rolling this out, the documentation was not available for 2013 SharePoint, but we did rely on the 2010 documentation. And so that way we were able to give our storage requirements to the storage team. And so that's how we got the high-speed storage that we needed here. Yeah,
and I did fail to mention that these are all virtual servers. So we had separate hosts with this also so that at any time we could go from one to the other, or they're allowed to switch to a separate host also.
And we got a diagram upcoming that will show you that.
And we did spend a lot of time working to figure out exactly which availability groups should hold which databases. We worked with Microsoft to get that set up so that when we have failover in the future for DR, that it fails over the databases in the correct order.
Yeah, so when we do, or if and when we do enable DR later on, then this last availability group that has the content databases, that'll be the one that we mirror over to the DR site asynchronously. But these other ones we won't bother mirroring because Microsoft doesn't really, support replicating an entire farm. So you have to have a whole separate farm set up and managed differently, and you just replicate only the databases that we need. So this is an area where we kind of spend some time kind of trying to figure out what the right mix is. And honestly, it'll probably never be an issue, but we've got that there.
And this slide just gives you a little more detail of how we set up the availability groups on the servers and how the failovers would work.
Yeah, so you can see here that kind of what Michael talked about earlier is we made the conscious decision to do everything virtual. So even our SQL servers are virtual. But what we did to start off with is that in our ESX hosts, because we are primarily a VMware shop, we had one dedicated SQL server to that one physical ESX host, right? And then what we said is over time, once we, especially Michael, felt confident that there wasn't going to be any resource constraints, then we might start adding a second or third virtual SQL server to that physical ESX host if we needed it. And it actually has not really been an issue for us.
Well, and with SharePoint, also, you need to make sure that you reserve those resources. You cannot share your CPU or your RAM with other applications. It will mess your SharePoint up. So make sure your virtual team locks all that stuff down.
And then we also did this because there are some challenges with SQL Server licensing, and so we wanted to be sure and fit within those. One thing that was kind of interesting, so there's so many ways you can reference these database nows, right? Because with availability groups, you get a listener name and a listener port, and it's got its own IP address and all that. And then on top of that, we decided to use SQL Server client aliases. So you have kind of another level of abstraction. So when you look in the config database, the reference for the SQL servers is going to be like SPS E_content, for example, right? And we're able to kind of take those references and move them between environments, and everything stays in place. So I know over the years there's been a lot of kind of churn in the community about whether or not SQL client aliases are worth it or not, but we decided to go ahead and do that. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about what we did to achieve some of the scalability for the site.
We, since we have people that access our sites around the world, we needed to keep it so that it was, a fast response time for them. We use a content delivery network. We use Akamai. If you don't know what the content delivery network is, basically it's just Akamai has roughly, I believe, 40,000 servers around the world that we cache pages and other items up into the cloud there, or up onto those servers, so that the people in those regional areas can download those things or access those pages much faster. You can have a few issues with caching, in terms of if things, you can push out a maintenance page on accident and you have to clear those, or other errors. But it's very solid, and it works really well for us.
Yeah, you want to watch out there. You can configure a lot of rules, right? So, for example, SharePoint gives you, I'm sorry, I've hit one of those errors before, right? You want to make sure that the CDN is configured to look at the status code of the page that gets returned, so it doesn't cache that error messages, right? We do things like some of the more static pages on the sites might be cached for 7 days, right? But our marketing partners have the ability to clear the cache whenever they need to. Let's say we're doing a launching a new product, or making some significant changes to the site, right? But like Michael said, it does require a lot more troubleshooting, because the page that is being rendered for you may be coming from any of the caching servers around the world, right? So you got to be able to kind of validate that. And it does significantly reduce the load that actually hits on our origin servers. So we have a healthy mix of pages that we feel are fairly static in our cache by Akamai, and then other pages, especially some of the search-driven ones, which are not static. So we still get those requests directly to our origin servers here in the United States. And this can be pretty expensive, though, right? But for us, a global site like us, it was actually worth the effort and the money. Okay, so another thing, these are some basic things that you absolutely should be doing. So you want to be sure to enable blob caching. That's something that AutoSP installer is a nice little checkbox that will update the web.config to do that for you. That it tells the browser to cache things like images, CSS, and JavaScript for you, right? We found that we wanted to increase the object cache on our site collections from 100 to 200 megabyte, right? We also set output caching as well to a minimum of 5 minutes on the entire site. So if Akamai is having to kind of clear the cache, and all of its servers around the world are going to be hitting our origin servers to kind of refresh that, at least that kind of provides a buffer on the servers as well. There's lots of great information on TechNet about these ways to do this. You should absolutely be reading those, understanding those, and implementing those. And then, of course, we enabled IIS compression, both dynamic and static. And these are things that are hard to script, so we never kind of got around to creating just the right scripts to automate these things right here. Okay, so lessons learned with regards to scalability. Plan ahead, determine your caching and compression strategy. Katie already mentioned, pay attention to your page sizes. Make sure your customers don't put any extremely large images on there. Most people are pretty experienced and know not to do that anymore. You will want to get familiar with web developer and debugging tools, F12 on the browser, things like Fiddler, because you'll use those to kind of troubleshoot issues. We also put a fair amount of effort into doing load testing. So hopefully you have someone on your staff or someone that you can engage to help come up with your load test strategy. It was interesting for us. We worked with our partners in marketing to determine what kind of use cases do we want to do with load testing. So they came up with about 5 use cases. One of those use cases is when a user hits the site and goes through the menus and navigation to download a driver, right? And that may be 50% of the load, for example, right? So we had those use cases. Then you need to decide, well, where do you think the load is going to come from? What different regions of the world? And as we saw earlier, right, the bulk of our traffic comes from Europe. We have a lot come from Asia as well. And then you want to determine how many concurrent users are going to be doing this, right? And you want to start off pretty small. So we had to kind of do all these calculations and figure out pages per second and stuff like that to do our load testing. And then we used Visual Studio to do all the load test generation. And so we had some servers around the world at AMD sites that would kind of generate that load. And then with the CDN vendor, they had access to a great tool called Keynote. And they would Keynote would hit our servers from around the world and kind of give us reports on the page loads. So basically, all of our pages around the world, a lot of them would load up in less than a second, but the more dynamic ones that would be coming back into the OS would be about under 2 seconds. All right, Gil's going to come back up and talk a little bit about the next step and the lessons learned.
So hopefully, guys, you found that information worth staying late for. I know we're standing between you and happy hour probably, so just got a couple of slides and then we'll get into the Q&A. So where are we going now? Where we're going next is to just finish out the AMD.com. There's one more site collection we need to move, and that's getting done this month, right? Just checking, because that's what I committed. The other thing we're going to do is then we're going to start to extend the capabilities of our SharePoint farm into the new other sites that we've got. So for example, shop.amd.com is a really interesting site. We go out every day and collect product listings from 50 of our partners worldwide. We pull it into one place and we deliver it basically almost as an e-commerce site, just missing the buy button. So this is going to be a very search-driven site. It's going to be something that really deals with structured content. It's about filtering. It's about refiners. So we're really looking forward to putting it on that environment. The next thing we're going to do after that is we're going to make our first foray into secure external sites. We're going to deploy a whole separate farm per Microsoft's, whole separate infrastructure per Microsoft's recommendation, and that's where we're going to put our partner portal. That's the portal our 20,000 or so channel partners use to talk to us, where we deliver secure information. Once we get that going, now we'll have a secure system, and that's when we'll start to really stretch the legs in this thing. Right now, I have a digital asset management system from Artesia that we use to deliver all of our digital assets, everything from copy, pictures, videos, etc. Those things cost a fair bit of money, so I'm in the middle of upgrading it. So instead of going and buying another $1 million system, what we're going to do is we're going to try and replicate the 80 or 90% of the features that we really use into SharePoint. Right, guys? Just checking. Everyone's nodding, right? So we're going to try and get that done sometime in the third quarter. So as you can tell, these guys are going to be busy this year. So, to try and wrap up some of the things you probably heard us talk about, when we look back on the 2007 versus 2013 experience, the 2013 experience was just light years better. We did it in under 8 months, I guess. And it was just less stressful. One of the big things, I think, is we decided to simplify. If you can avoid customizations, do it. Because the less customizations you have, the better off you are. Just everything is much, much simpler. We're happy with what we've got. We used what was available, and we're really comfortable with what we're delivering. The next thing that you have to watch out for is, one of the things that we did wrong in 2007 is because of the way the company was architected, the regions actually owned their own web teams. So there were 7, 8, 10 web teams running around, and the only way we could control the site was to build all of those control mechanisms into the site. That's what a lot of the customizations were about. So this time, I was able to successfully execute a bit of a palace coup, and now all those teams report to me. So instead of building that complexity into the system, we manage it in business process. Because I can change a business process tomorrow. I don't have to go rebuild any code. So that's worked out really well as well. The other thing, you think you heard us talk about what we used and didn't use. Just because it's in the system doesn't mean you have to use it. It's a nice buffet. You don't have to eat every dish. So we looked at all the tools that came with a new product. We used the ones that we needed. And finally, especially if you're moving from an old SharePoint to this SharePoint, really, really explore. Look at what you need. Don't assume that the stuff you did before was the right way to do it. Take a look at the new systems and make new decisions. Make the right decisions for this set of products. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Q&A, but I think Katie's got a request first.
Don't forget to fill out your survey. We really do want to know what you guys thought about this session. It's been quite the experience for us over the past year and a half, moving from SharePoint 2007 to 2013. So please fill out surveys and let us know what you thought, any questions you have. Q&A?
So, yeah, if you come up to the mic for the questions, please. And Suraj Muhammad, would you please stand up? So Suraj, we are lucky enough to have a part-time dedicated support engineer for SharePoint, and he's been through all the trials and tribulations, so he might help us answer some of the questions. We are going to be going to the Q&A expert afterwards, and Suraj is going to be there with us, so feel free to ask him any questions there as well.
Go ahead, I'll repeat your question. So.
Do you use SharePoint for the internet and also for the intranet?
So the question is, do we use SharePoint for the internet and the extranet, or the intranet?
Intranet.
So
Yes.
we do use it for, definitely use it for the internet site. We still use it for,
We have 8 regional internal farms currently, and we have 3 going on 4 external.
So intranet, extranet, and internet. We use it for a lot. We even use it for some BI stuff as well.
actually our current partner site is another SharePoint external site. Michael's going to be busy because I think he's on tag to move all of those sometime soon. So, next question?
Yeah, so you guys had a slide about upping your blob cache, and I saw the mention of in the future you're looking at digital asset management. Are y'all making use of image renditions at all? Is that something that is,
The image renditions?
yeah.
I haven't trained the designers to use image renditions. So, and our need for a DAM is really a digital asset management system, web images aside. So we're talking like the full, all of our digital documentation, print stuff, everything will be on hopefully SharePoint, but I do need to teach them about image renditions, which you cannot use unless blob cache is enabled, just so you know.
You mentioned something at the beginning about a custom migration tool. Were you talking specifically about content migration from one farm to another? And did you look at other products like Metalogix or DocAv and why those didn't work for you?
We thought about them, but we needed to do this on the cheap, right? And so actually Richard was the one who started the code for us that actually do the migration, and he did everything based on the Prime API, right, which is what content deployment is based on as well. And then one of our developers took it over from there. So we had to get very specific about the pieces of content that could be extracted out of 2007, then put in an XML file, and then our business partners would get to create another XML file, which would determine what's going to be extracted back in. And honestly, this is really hard to do with pages libraries, right? This is not just bringing over a list of documents and stuff like that, but we actually managed to get the tool to work really well for us, and so we didn't have to pay.
We did look at those other tools, and they're great. We just really couldn't afford them at the time.
Our site's large, and when they're charging you per megabyte, basically.
Gigabyte.
Gigabyte, it gets kind of crazy.
I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of just press releases, because we have to keep the last 6 years of press releases available on the site at all times.
Yeah.
So it's not a small task.
And they measure our PR. They get paid by the press release. So
I think they do.
press
I think they
release.
do. I'm thinking about switching jobs.
Yeah.
I can write press releases like nobody's business.
And we wanted to be really precise about the individual pieces of content that would get pulled out of 2007 and then subsequently put back into 2013.
Well, and it was great because the tool allowed us to actually map site column to site column when we migrated the pages. So we weren't restricted to having exactly the same content type and site column in 2007 as we did in 2013. The tool allowed us to actually individually map. So it worked out great. It was very flexible for us in that way.
Thanks.
Do you use RBS because you said you have so much of content in the database?
Do we use Remote Blob Store? No, we do not.
Everything is in the content database?
Have we thought about using it?
Everything is in the content database?
Yes, everything is in the content database. Yep.
And you don't see any performance difference?
No, we do not.
What size do you guys have to migrate to
What?
Oh, because I had mentioned that the content database in 2007 was at 70 gig and down to 7 gig now?
No, I said we were at 70.
I want to say it's under 15. But honestly, I think it's been a while since we looked at the content database size for support.
We're less worried about it now, so it's a good sign.
So you didn't.
So the question is, what cache ratio did we achieve with Akamai? What portion of our pages are cached versus what's not? We cache pretty much all the static pages, but the support site's not cached at all, is it?
No, it does have some sections
yeah.
that are cached.
So basically anything that's dynamic, we can't really cache.
Certain images and the specific drivers and different things.
What do you think the percentage is?
Yeah, that's maybe 40%.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe
That's
50.
cached.
It, we've we've been able to handle the traffic fairly well. Because we've essentially had the same architecture for scalability for a few years. So we don't see any of those issues for the most part. And the pages that we do end up caching are some of the really, really, really heavily used ones, like the homepage. The homepage gets hit by everybody. So having that out there just alleviates a lot of the load.
Plus the load testing did real well for us, and we also have the scalability go up. We keep a close eye. Like when we release Catalyst drivers, I mean, we have massive amounts of people to hit us. So we were able to load test on those numbers, and we did actually above and beyond that to make sure that our servers could handle it.
Yeah,
we
think
overbuilt, but we did it for a reason.
about 5 years ago, something happened and our caching was turned off. So all of a sudden, all that load's coming into us, right? Our internet gateway was the first thing that went down. The SharePoint servers were still doing fine. This is even back in the 2007 days.
Yeah, we filled the pipe before the server died.
Yeah. So the question is, how long do we cache the content? It's page dependent, right?
Yeah, it's actually nice the way that we have Akamai set up, and the fact that our IT department is all about empowering the business. So we actually can control that. We can configure how long pages are cached and all that. So 7 days is the average for static pages. So yeah.
So when we do launches, we have the ability to blow the content away. We can manually clear it. So
Yeah.
we lean sometimes more towards just letting it sit, and we'll clear it when we need it.
And you don't have to clear the entire thing either. You can clear bits and pieces of it at a time. I couldn't hear what you
Repeat
said.
that again?
So
I'm
the
sorry?
question is, do we have any API calls from Akamai to clear cache automatically?
They do give us the tools to
Yeah,
do that.
but we don't have any set up.
Yeah, actually, one of our early customizations back on 2007 that we ended up abandoning was that we were trying to get fancy with calls like the Akamai and go, whenever this page gets published and it appears on the remote site, right, we had to specifically turn on, because with content deployment, the destination site, event handlers are turned off by default. So we were going to get all smart. We turned event handlers back on, and we said, okay, trigger this event whenever the published page sits over here, and we're going to call Akamai and clear the cache. You're right. It turned out to be way too complex, and we had to pull that one back.
Yeah.
You have a question?
You talked about the PLA.
Mm-hmm.
Are you aware that Microsoft has PLA scripts as well? Have you looked at those?
So the question is, he was asking about PLAs, and were we aware that there are PLA scripts as well?
I wasn't aware of that. At least my experience is they're super secretive about that. You have to have an MCS engagement to get to any of that information, right? And
At the time that they were doing it, PLA was still in the progress, so it was not completed. But yes, now PLA has a lot of scripts.
I think we were doing a lot of this testing. I think it was December 2012, right? It was right before Christmas. So it was really, we started this right when the product was right out of the bakery at that point.
March 31st. Or I probably don't have a job anymore.
Yes.
So it will be March 31st.
They'll still have a job. It'll just be a
maybe not
different
April
one.
Fool's.
No April Fools, no.
I think
March
there was a
31st.
question on this side. So, do you have a question? So the question is how we translate the content. We have a company called Csoft out of Beijing, and we have a relationship with them where as our pages are created, they translate them. And interestingly, actually, I talked them into hiring 13 SharePoint content managers for me who speak 13 different languages and dropping them into Beijing. So now the translation company translates it, we review it, approve it, and then they put it on. So what that does is that saves us a ton of time because our people don't necessarily have to review the content. And now when I have to train my content managers, I don't send people to 15 different cities all over the world. They go to Beijing, everybody's there. Every language is managed out of Beijing. So they're around. If you see them, you can talk to them.
That's what I was
Oh, sorry. Let me, did you have a follow-up? Sorry. Was the question how often we publish variations? Sorry. Yeah, so we can create pages in all variations or just some of them. So what happens is we just have a business process that's triggered. Like I was talking about, we try to do this stuff through business process now. The pages are created. They're passed to the regional guys, and then they turn around and basically, we have another business process or project process to make sure they get posted. Because not all of our stuff, percentage of our stuff gets translated worldwide immediately. Some of it doesn't immediately, and some of it never does. So we just have to manage that through process. You have a question about machine translation? So we do use machine translation in the sense that we use the translation memory. So as we review and approve words, it goes into the translation memory. So if we send that same set of words back through, they don't retranslate it. They just say, hey, you've already approved this, and we use that. We don't use straight machine translation because it's not ready yet. So it's human translation. Anything that's been translated becomes machine translation, but it's all reviewed by a human at the end.
So we do not use the SharePoint,
SharePoint
machine
machine
translation
translation,
capabilities.
yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
one day we'll get there, but haven't had the need for it so far.
Well, yeah, and we've talked about it, exporting the XLIFs and having them translated and then re-importing them. But, with the way that CSoft is working right now and us going over there and training them to enter content and, AMD's need to, this is how we translate this word.
So I didn't do it, some other team did it. We had a brilliant high definition thing, brilliant HD. It got translated as shiny hard drive in Portuguese.
Yes.
So that's why we were careful about that.
A question about the page migration from the hierarchical structure that you had out to the flatter view that's more SEO friendly. What kind of tools or resources did you guys use to accomplish that?
So the question was, from when we migrated to the new hierarchy, what kind of tools did we use?
Well, it's that custom migration tool. Just basically dumped everything into, I guess, just the one document library initially.
Yeah,
because we had four subsites per variation.
Yeah.
We agreed with marketing that they were basically going to start over.
No, I threatened to quit if we didn't.
So that's a really important point, is we did a forklift upgrade. Those old servers are going to get tossed. We started over, and we started over because that site's been up for 6 years. It was probably well past 20,000 pages. It was just time. Every once in a while, when sites grow organically, you just have to start over, and this is the moment we chose to do it.
It was a really good opportunity for us to implement a new IA and rewrite content and redesign pages and then enter them in manually with a fresh start. So the only things that we migrated through script were knowledge-based articles, FAQs. Did we do FAQs?
Yes.
FAQs and press releases.
Yeah.
Everything else is done manually.
So that tool helped to restructure the content from the source into the new way in the destination.
What we didn't mention is in the middle of this, we decided to blow up the brand, the information architecture, the look and feel. So that complicated it. And then when we look at content, we kind of look at it, there's structured content like press releases, knowledge-based articles that look the same all the time. But a lot of our content's unstructured. The page could look this way or that way or whatever. So we treated them as two separate problems.
So do you have a broken page link problem after you move pages and changed URLs?
No.
Yeah.
References to URLs and so forth for your cross-referencing things from different areas of the site?
No, the tool took care of all that. And as part of troubleshooting the tool, yes, those things happen. But, because you got a publishing page and it's making a reference to an image in a different library somewhere, and it resolved all those differences. That's one of the reasons why it was so complex to put that together. But as part of the migration, those things remained intact. And there was a few edge cases where it couldn't fix things up, and they just fixed those manually themselves. It was just a one-time migration.
I get a 404 report every week, and she hears about it if there's lots of stuff on it. So it's true.
Another question?
Which analytics tools did you evaluate? What did you tell us?
Analytics tools?
Yes.
So we currently use Adobe Analytics, and we've been using them for a while. We used them when they were still Omniture. We found that they give us we have a lot of expertise in it and a lot of knowledge in that system.
Is that the Omniture product?
Yeah, it's the Omniture product. Question?
Can you give a little more details on your VR strategy, where is your VR found located, what's the concept of application, and how do you take care of automated failovers and maybe patching?
We don't.
We wanted to make sure everything was in place to support it when we
Right.
decided to do it.
We had it in 2007, and obviously everyone knows it's complicated and takes time, and you got to restart search and then you make sure your DNS fails over and everything. It just was really complicated. It took 8 to 12 hours for us to fail over to our other farms. We had to get this up and running so fast, and then with the limited resources we have, we haven't gone down that path yet, but we will be looking at that in the future.
So, what Akamai gives us some limited capability, because what happens is we go down, if the pages are cached, you can still see them. So, when I sat down and had to make this business decision, the reality is we've been running without it for 7 years. It's like, what the hey? What's another year? So, do you have a question? Oh, we're the driver served. They're cached with Akamai, right?
Yeah.
So we place the drivers in an Akamai large file cache because some of our drivers are 100 megs plus. So we basically store the link, and when we deliver the drivers, they're coming straight out of Akamai.
Yeah, that's a great question, because to one of the questions about RBS, no, they are not stored in SharePoint, and subsequently the content database, no.
Yeah. That helps us keep our load down across the board, so it's nice. So.
She's good.
You mentioned the project took about 8 months. What was the team size? We started right before Christmas. We went in and we spent a couple of weeks in MTC. We spent January convincing the executives to say yes. We started in February. Support was live in October. So that's kind of the
August.
general August.
It was
Okay.
rebranded
The
in
rebrand.
October. It was live in,
So we did it in
or was it
7 months.
somewhere between August and October?
The team, so what we ended up doing is because we had to keep the current site running and do this new site, what I did is I brought on some contract resources to take over running the current site, and I pulled off Katie and all the people all the rock stars for it, and had them do the new site. So we basically did it in-house for the most part with some contract support of existing work. And you had 4, how many people were working on it full time? The new one, just you and Scott and Peter and
Yeah, probably 6.
6
7.
on our side, and then how many people did you have, Michael?
Well, we had the bulk of our work was in the beginning, so they had to start over from scratch. So we really had about 2 people that worked to get everything set up, and then the basic support after that tapered off in terms of what they needed from us.
Yeah, it was basically me and a combination of some of his offshore resources.
This was about half the time it took SharePoint, the 2007 one. So it was much better.
Well, plus the release bits were so much better. I mean, with 2007, personally, if we would have had to make a decision back then, I wouldn't have gone live until after the infrastructure and blackout updates, because it was just, we had so many issues. In 2013, we had a few bugs and things we went through, but it's way less complicated. The pages are faster, leaner, and it's much better.
And we definitely burned through Suraj's hours pretty quickly and had to
We used
replenish
up
some
a
of
year's
those.
worth of consulting in 4 months.
Yeah, the good thing with Microsoft support, if it's a bug, all those hours they spent into it, you don't have to pay for. So we got a lot of hours
Still
back.
pay
that
for
way.
DSC hours, don't you? It's the Premiere you don't pay for.
Do you plan to use any kind of publishing approval, like workflows or something like that, massive or related to only one page, one content?
So the question is, do we use any publishing approval workflows? We pretty much manage it through just business process. We have a team of project managers that manages every project that flows through. So our approval process is basically, it has to clear our project managers who are initial QA, and then it all goes to the business sponsor. Unless I own the page myself, no page goes out until the business sponsor says yes, which is why it was really important that they could see it in context. So they say yes, we do it over email, and we have a really robust internal SharePoint site that we use to manage our projects. That approval is recorded, and we go live.
So we have versioning and, of course, publishing and approval turned on, but we don't use workflow to generate the email that says you got to go check out this page. It's all done through process.
How do you manage the massive publishing
People push the button.
Yeah.
Yeah.
for every content?
Yeah. We don't, because we're, when the site's up and running, the largest push we'll ever do, unless we do another rebrand, which we better not, probably 80 or 100 pages for a product launch would be huge for us. Mm-hmm. We don't do big ones. We make changes every day, but they tend to be in small batches.
And the timing for product launches, the U.S. is generally the only region that has to have that content out at a specific time. Sometimes some of the bigger European countries as well. But usually it's after the U.S. is published, you guys publish it within the next day or so. So it's mostly only that one that's this has to be done now. So it gives us a little bit of leeway to make sure all the other regions get everything, done accurately and published.
And they don't need our support any longer, since we don't have content deployment running, because with content deployment, we had to have someone on ready to go in case there was some issue or something hung that we could immediately address that because they're time-sensitive launches, and if we miss those, we get yelled at.
Well, that's one of the big advantages we didn't talk about is with the way we're set up now, I can tell you sort of within the hour when the page is going to launch, which is kind of problematic when PR sends a press release at 12:01 and they want it out at 12:01. So, which VPN? Oh, VPN tool?
Business process management?
We don't. So we actually have a home-built, we have a really robust, we call them work sites for each project. So we manage it all through SharePoint internally.
They're team sites.
Yeah.
We've custom lists, and then it's a lot of, so the approval has to be done by our business sponsors, our internal business sponsors, whoever owns the product, those sorts of things. They don't take place in the team site workflow. So it's mostly our project managers communicating to them, and then it's the actual web team doing the work that works within the team site, and that's how we communicate.
It's process, yeah.
It's business process, yeah.
We made a decision a while ago to kind of, because our projects vary so much, it could be a tiny thing, it could be huge, we try to manage it through process for the most part, and we're pretty successful. Honestly, we have a really long tenured team. The team's really stable, so that helps. If the team was changing all the time, I'd probably reconsider that. So.
What's your patching schedule?
What's the what, sorry?
Patching schedule?
How often do we patch?
The CUs, we're off at least by one. We've learned that we don't like to be first.
We have a monthly maintenance window when we do deploy patches at the server OS or SharePoint level, and Michael's team thoroughly tests those.
And Suraj reviews everything with us prior to, and we make sure whether or not the CU is really important or not. If there's really nothing in it, we may wait a little longer. If it's something that's really important, like this April CU, we're going to push it out as fast as possible.
Generally, we found that all the CUs are addressing some bug that's been problematic for us. We pretty much always end up deploying the CUs. We have run out of time. We're supposed to be heading over to the Ask the Experts, but feel free to hit us up later on. Thank you.